genetics are a phenomenal thing. A 40-year-old person who looks and feels like they're 28 isn't because they left things to chance. They're doing things differently. Chronic disease, aging, poor performance. These are all the result of wrong choices. But how do you know what the right choices are for you? And what would be the impact if you always made the right choice? What if you can change the day you die? When you see those first wrinkles, those gray hairs, or a call from the doctor and they say, "I need to see you, your test results are in." We've taken it for granted that this is meant to happen, that aging and disease are just a part of life. Well, what if they're not? You can't feel cancer coming. There's no warning that dementia's on the way, and so we think these things just happen. We get sick, we try to treat it, but it's too late. Well, now, there's a better way. A way that puts us each in charge of our own destiny. Genetic research has advanced more in the last 3 years than the last 30. And this personal instruction manual that's in each one of us has finally been properly decoded. We can now get ahead of disease or even reverse it, allowing us to decide how we age. Our scientists have clinically studied over 5,000 people. We've sat in front of each and every one of them. We looked at their hair, their skin, their mood and behavior, their medical history, everything about them, all overlaid on their DNA map. We then understood where the biochemistry of your trillions of cells and the instructions of your 22,000 genes intersect. And with that, what choices each one of us needs to make to slow down aging and catch disease before it happens. I have no doubt that with the genetic insights we're seeing today, chronic disease will soon be a story that we tell our grandchildren. If you understand why chronic disease and aging really happen, you also understand that they are truly optional. Good evening, everybody, or good morning or good afternoon, depending on what part of the world you're in. I know we have friends all over the place.
Good afternoon, Kashif.
How are you doing?
I'm well, sir. How are you?
Yeah, for you, it's still afternoon.
Yes. I wanted to remind everybody that we're using the Q&A section of the system, which can be found at the top middle of your screen on the Zoom window. So if you have questions for Kashif, please put them in there and he will look at those as we go through. We will make sure all of your questions are answered before the webinar is finished. It's all yours, sir.
Thanks, Tracy. Yeah, so the intention tonight is a couple-fold. We're focusing on mood and behavior, also referred to as executive function, also cognitive function. How does your brain work? How does that affect your behavior? How does that affect your perception? How does that affect people's perception of you? Really, ultimately, how you behave. And the intention was to expand on what you've been delivered in the reports in a more nuanced fashion. So we're going to dive a little deeper. And you may resonate with someone and say, oh, wow, now I get what's been going on and how I feel, etc. The other half and purpose of tonight is to give you a forum to ask the questions. It's like, I read the mood and behavior section, but there's one thing I didn't get, or there's something that I was hoping I would find out that I didn't find, or there's a thing that I want to fix and I'm not quite sure where to start. So we're here tonight to support you with that and to let you know that there's more that we know than what's in the reports, but there's some things that we can't hand over just regulatory wise. Again, this is healthcare, so we have to be careful in terms of providing information without support in terms of clinical support. So here tonight, we're here to support you there, to give you those answers and to give you that in-depth information. So I'm going to dive into the mood and behavior section, not in the context that you've seen it in, as per the reports, but more as per the genes themselves. And what we really do well, where we thrive, is interpretation. We know what the genes mean. So, and you've already seen a lot of meaning in the reports. You've seen words like anxiety, depression, burnout, procrastination. We're going to look at those, but we're also going to dive deeper into some of the bigger words. And just so you know, in the Q&A, we're going to spend the first hour or so going through giving you a deeper dive. The balance of the time will open up for Q&A. So if you think of a question, go ahead and drop it in. It's in the Q&A box. It will be held there until it's answered. So we have a way of tracking what's been answered or not. So if you have a thought, don't lose it. Drop it in the Q&A. If there's anything that's related to, again, the content, we'll save it for the Q&A session. But for example, Ching's question, how often do you have these sessions? I'll answer that now. We schedule them in cohorts or groups, meaning that a number of people for a period of a month or two will buy a bunch of DNA tests. And then we offer 4 sessions for those people in groups. So you guys will be alerted, whoever's here tonight, to 3 more sessions. So it's over 8, somewhere upwards of 10 hours of interaction we're going to have together to give you the ultimate value we possibly could give you from your DNA data. And today, like we said, mood and behavior, there's going to be a session about hormones and habits. There's going to be a session about diet, lifestyle, there's going to be an immunity, etc. There's going to be a just conversation on chronic disease and aging. So we're going to dive into all the various things you need to know about, broken up and split into 4 sessions. This is the first of 4. So look out for additional 3 emails. They're going to be at the same time every week, moving on for the next month. Then it's over. And new test buyers will then start the journey with us again in another cohort later down the road to answer your question. Now, mood and behavior. The first gene we're going to look at is COMT, C-O-M-T, which you've probably seen in your report. This gene actually appears in a few places in your report. It's mood and behavior. It's also hormones. It's also a tail end of methylation. So it's connected to the methylation cycle. And we're not covering that today. We're just talking about mood. So what this gene does is clear neurochemicals. It's a protein that actually gets rid of chemicals in your brain that allow you to feel the way you feel. And we're going to use this today to talk about 2 genes and 2 feelings, dopamine and adrenaline. So let's start with dopamine. If you look at the DRD2 gene, there's 3 possible outcomes. And anyone here that has your data, I would suggest taking a look, having it ready with you so you can note which version of each gene you are as we go along. That's the best way to get value here. Have your report open. So you can just need to know the gene results, the version of the genes. So DRD2, which is in mood and behavior, in the summary, if you open up the summary of mood and behavior, you're going to see GG, GA, or AA. These letters represent in the specific location of the DRD2 gene where we know it's possible for there to be a variation, the versions you could potentially have, fast or slow. So what this speaks to is the density of the receptors in the brain. How dense are your receptors that actually receive dopamine and allow you to feel pleasure or reward? Pleasure is I ate something tasty and felt good. Or reward is I achieved something, I hit a target, I won something, I accomplished, and I got a sense of reward. These are the two things that dopamine allows you to feel. The way it happens is a bit of an anticipation. You know it's coming. I can smell the food. I haven't eaten it yet, but it's coming. Then there's the moment, right? Like I bite into it and like, wow, the eureka moment happens. Then there's the breakdown. You need to get rid of the dopamine to get back to normal. That's not your normal state to be in a pleasure or reward seeking state. You have to reach baseline. Then there's clearance. So we're going to focus on two of the big ones, which is the moment and the clearance. So if you have the AA version of the DRD2 receptors, which very few people do, some people don't. Some people do. Sorry, but very few people do. I am included in that bucket. I am AA. It means that your density of the receptors is very slim to none, sparse, very difficult to actually bind dopamine and feel that feeling and also anticipate that feeling. Now, if your COMT gene, the first one we talked about, is GG, which means fastest possible activity, not only are you feeling things way down here, but it also isn't lasting long enough because your clearance is really fast. So now we can start to toggle and think of this as somewhat of a matrix and think, well, if I was up here with the very low dopamine receptors and a really fast clearance, I might use words like depression because I don't get to feel. Or I might use words like addiction because it's so hard for me to receive and experience pleasure that I pursue it and I chase it. Or I might use words like achievement or entrepreneurialism because I seek reward. Remember, when it comes to satisfaction, which is ultimately what dopamine is giving you, either through pleasure or reward, you don't need both. You only need one. Your brain is seeking satisfaction either through pleasure or reward. And again, you don't need both. So if you power that satisfaction through reward, you can drop the pleasure. And you'll see that people with this profile, if you find yourself in this, often will experience one of these three moods, or even all three in their lifetime: depression, addiction, achievement. This is why you see a lot of high performance people like celebrities, athletes, CEOs commit suicide, because the same thing that gave them their superpower to take the big risks and do the crazy things that nobody was willing to do, to move to LA and with no money in your pocket and apply to every job until you finally became a star on a Star Wars movie, that takes a lot of risk. Not everyone can do that. But that same profile, if you remove the reward and you stop getting the achievement, leads to depression. The converse, right? Same wiring. And this is why it's very important as we're going through everything today to understand that there's no good or bad. There's no you are this, you are this. Here's your genetic wiring, which was meant to be a superpower. You were designed to be a warrior that builds great things, but you were in the wrong context where there was no reward, there was no opportunity. And so you became depressed. Context is key when it comes to mood and behavior. Try and understand, as we speak today, who you are, what you're wired to do and be, and then understand where should you be, who should you be amongst, what kind of work should you be doing, what should your environment look like to be your best. The same thing that is your superpower can also be your kryptonite, depending on the context. So now let's look at the opposite end. Somebody who has the maximum possible dopamine receptors, the GG, right? The GG version of the DRD2 gene, and has the slowest possible COMT or clearance, the AA version. They are going to be highly risk adverse and they're not going to seek reward. They're not going to seek pleasure because it's so easy for them to experience. They're constantly in a state of satisfaction. So what the everyday is far beyond good enough. Everything is good. Now this leads to other goods and bads. The other bad is, while I may not become addicted, addiction by definition means I need to do it regularly every day or I get frustrated and my day is structured around it. They may instead binge because their COMT clearance is so slow that when they finally feel that wow pleasure, they get stuck. As opposed to, I need another hit, I need another hit, I need another hit. It's not about another hit because they didn't clear and leave the moment. It's more like wow, this is good, I can't stop. Another hit means once it's done, let's do it again. Once it's done, and binging is like, I'm not going to stop doing it, right? The difference between, if we use a more nefarious example, I need to drink every day when I come home from work versus I don't drink every day, but when I do, it's the whole bottle or nothing. That's binging, right? So this also applies to your work, to your relationships. It's not necessarily a bad. It could also be, well, it's pretty hard to get me to do anything because I'm so satisfied that I don't feel the need. I don't feel the urgency, even though I agree and I understand. And I say yes, I will nod my head and say yes. I will still not do it unless it really gives me a lot of value and sense of reward. And then when I do it, I will do a better job than anybody because I binge. So think of the subject matter expert. Think of the person that comes back with that stack of paper like this, with all that dense, high quality work. The person that you can't get them to start, but when they do, the day is like they're gone. They're disappeared for the day. So that's now you see these two extremes. You can start to interpret the in between. The middle ground is more of a Zen state. If somebody has this middle dopamine, GA, and they have the middle clearance, GA, they're experiencing pleasure and reward somewhat as it should be, right? It's not overly expressed, it's not underly expressed. So they're not like stuck and wow, and they're also not constantly like squirrel effect, more, yes, right? They are more giving at whatever stimulus comes in the value that it deserves. And now if their comped clearance is also in the middle, they're also experiencing it for the right amount of time, which means they're not dissatisfied and they're also not binging. They got exactly what they needed. Picture the nurse, right? Picture that highly reliable nurse who is going to get it done, but she will also leave work on time, right? That person that is going to, you don't have to push them. They're not a flake. They will do their work. That person who will show up, that is always supportive, but there's a sort of a boundary to things because they're not overly reward seeking. They're not doing it for the satisfaction. They're doing it because they know what they need to do. So you have these three big profiles, and most people fit in one of these three. There's nuances where something can be turned on or off, or meaning, for example, you might have a weird combination of a really a low dopamine expression and a very slow clearance. So all of a sudden, you don't see that profile often where they don't bind much, because keep in mind, these profiles were designed functionally. Like, we evolved by winning. And when I say evolved, we inherited the genetics of our ancestors, those who thrived, right? The people that are alive today are alive due to successful ancestors. And I'm not talking about evolution in the scientific sense that our DNA changed. It didn't change. It's more that there's two options that this lottery keeps passing on. Which two options did the best? And that's what keeps proliferating and, turning into more generations. So you'll see these extremes when it comes to mood behavior. Most people fit in them. Once in a while, you'll see a subtle nuance. And if you are one of those unique people, we'll get into that in the Q&A. You can ask whatever question you need. But these are the three general buckets we see. This highly reward seeking, I can't experience pleasure. It doesn't last long enough. I need more. I can't get no satisfaction. There's the highly dense and very slow. Yeah, I'm not interested. I'm a little bit flaky. I might say yes, but I'm still not going to do it. But when I do, holy cow, no one can stop me. Binge. Then there's this middle ground of, you can rely on me, but I'm not staying till 4 a.m. I got work tomorrow, right? That person, that reliable, gonna do it as per what needs to get done. So this is reward and pleasure. Now we layer on top of this. We look at ADRA2B, the noradrenaline response, the next gene, ADRA2B, I should say, sorry. And again, three potential outcomes we look at: II, ID, DD. Now here, we're looking for what's called an insertion or deletion. So it's not a location on the gene where there might be a variant or a SNP. It's a section of the gene that might be entirely missing. And by the way, Lori mentioned here that she has the AGDRD2 and the COMGG. Does it mean that I'm Zen but don't feel for very long? So yeah, you're comped GG, which means that you clear it quickly. And again, normally we keep the questions to the end, but just because it was so relevant. Yeah, so you're kind of teetering on that borderline of, my dopamine response is ideal, but it doesn't last long enough. So this is a very functional reward-seeking person. It's not like you're going to be an addict because the pleasure is optimal, but it didn't last long enough. So you might need to do it again, right? Or you might pursue it a little bit more, or your brain might move a little quicker. So it's more of a nuanced thing versus an extreme, very obvious profile. So now going back to ADRA2B, ADRA2B, we're looking for a deletion, which means it's not a SNP or a location where there's a spelling mistake. There's a whole chunk of the gene missing. Very important. And most genetic testing companies don't look for insertions or deletions, which is why they can't be as certain in their interpretation as we can. It's much more meaningful if an indel or insertion or deletion is possible and you have it. So if you have a D or a DD, that means you're missing a big chunk of code from this gene, and it does not function at its best, which means you're more likely to bind onto emotional stimulus. Mostly noted when it comes to negative. It's also true for positive, but you see it most when it comes to negative. The thing that causes you the wow shock factor. Again, adrenaline response. Adrenaline is pumping. That usually comes from shock and negative stimulus. Positive stimulus can get you there, but typically not. So if you are that person that has the ID or the DD, what does that mean? It means that you're missing a chunk of the gene that instructs your body to ignore the emotional imprint. So in the moment, we all experience it, the car accident, the fight, whatever that trauma is, that negative stimulus. But how do you remember it? How do we recall it? That's based on genetic capacity. And if you have ID or DD, you're much more likely to imprint, like literally tattoo into your memory, the feeling that you felt. Now, how does that express? When something like that comes along again, I had a fight with my sister. The next time your sister frowns, it's like, oh, not this again. The feeling comes back because your memory is wired to recall the feeling. Your memory not only gives you the intellect and the information that was imprinted and learned, but it also recalls the feeling. Some people just don't do that. If you have the II version, you're much more likely to do this. Now imagine a DD person, completely deleted, everything is trauma. And when I use the word trauma, it doesn't necessarily mean negative. It just means emotional imprint. I remember the feeling. I truly remember the feeling. Now imagine that DD person speaking to the II person. And imagine there was a car accident. Now imagine the II person says, let's get an Uber and go home. And imagine the DD person says, are you crazy? I'm walking, right? Now imagine a month later, you're walking down that street again. And the DD person says, can we go in a different direction? And the II person's like, why? What happened? That emotional imprint isn't there. Now, those perspectives, when you start to think about relationships and the people you work with, your children, and how perspective can be completely different for the exact same memory. Not only for the memory, for the next moment where you have to go through a similar emotive experience, how you're experiencing it completely differently. And now when this person says, not this again, and when this person says, this has nothing to do with last time, they're both right. That's what they're truly experiencing. And it's very hard, unless you understand, again, your genetic profile and who you are and the way you see the world, to align with people that are not wired like you. This is where friction comes from. This is where teams break down. This is where relationships break down. So, and this particular one is highly implicit in relationships because it has to do with emotional recall. It has to do with, how do I feel about what's happening? It's based on what we did before. And when you do not resonate with the way I feel, I feel like you have no empathy. I feel like you don't care. That's what people like this feel. And by the way, they also have more empathy and they have more emotional intelligence. If you have the ID or the DD, you typically are more capable of reading the room and understanding how people feel. You are more capable of coming back to someone with the EQ and being able to speak appropriately so that you don't hurt them, right? You typically are the person that people will lean on for emotional support, because when you speak and when you listen, they know you're tuned in not only intellectually, but also emotionally. Now, the opposite is true for the II person. The II person, they're like, why are you so cold? Why don't you care? Right? Why aren't you interested? So none of those things are true. It's just the degree to it. It's not like they didn't feel it. They just don't use the emotion as a primary decision-making tool. That's not their driver. Their driver is the intellect. Now, keep in mind, COMT, the same protein that we said clears dopamine, also clears this. So now if you have the IDDD, I recall, I imprint, I feel it, I remember the feeling. Next time that happens, the PTSD kicks in and it's like it never ended. It's just a continuation of the last scenario. It just keeps going. Now, if you also have the slow COMT, where the neurochemical took longer to get rid of, you're also remembering a lot more. Every little detail and nuance. This car accident happened on a Friday when it was raining and I was wearing a red jacket and you weren't wearing your deodorant. I remember those kind of details, right? Because you imprint and you were in that moment for a lot longer than the person who has the very fast calm clearance. And what we see is this confusion that kind of sets in. The person that has the emotional recall, yeah, I remember what it felt like, but I don't necessarily agree with you on what happened. Why? Because they weren't in it for long enough to even remember the intellectual component. And so it creates confusion. This is another source of friction. This is another source of relationship breakdown. This is another source of misalignment, right? Like, no, that's not what happened. It was actually like this. It's not as big a deal as you're saying, because they don't, the amount of information they retain, not only the feeling, but now we're talking about the intellect, they also don't retain because they cleared and they were in the moment for a lot less time than somebody else with slow COMT. So again, you start to map these pieces out. So there's this matrix of COMT and ADRA2B, and I have slow this and fast that, and you can start to self-interpret, right? Our intention here, by the way, genetics is usually, here's your data, now you need my help to interpret it for you. That's genetics. It's a list of genes with, which then requires interpretation. My intention here is to teach you how to interpret it, to teach you that if this means this and this means that, the next time you have any question about any problem, whether it's mood or a relationship, or it could even be diet related, it could even be why do I overeat, you can start to interpret. You could start to say, oh, that's why I eat the entire bucket of ice cream, because I'm a binger. So you trying to fix your weight loss problem might start here, right? You trying to fix your stress problem. Why am I, constantly falling asleep too early because I'm so burdened with stress? It's because the way I experience trauma and I don't let go, it's just this burden for me, right? So you start to use this tool to solve the problem that you're working on, even if it doesn't seem related, it probably is. Your genetic wiring, the red flags, those jobs that your body doesn't do well, lead to these symptomatic outcomes. You just have to reverse engineer. And that's why we're teaching you how to interpret. So now, that's ADRA2B, noradrenaline response, emotional imprint. You can start to see how you fit in a bucket. Your data already tells you who you are. And now you can apply that to, well, maybe when I speak to this person, I now understand. I can actually see their genetic profile because I get it. I get why they behave like this. They're not sort of, it's not that they don't care about me, and it's not that they don't care about this, whatever the information is. They're just perceiving it different. They don't hold on to the EQ, they hold on to the IQ. Very different perspective. So understanding that can change a lot. So now we layer on to more. Serotonin response. Your serotonin response, we speak of it typically as a mood regulator. And a lot of clinicians, this is a more well spoken of neurochemical. ADRA2B, noradrenaline response. It's not that, you won't hear it that often. Serotonin you'll hear everywhere, right? It's the most, I would say the most spoken of neurochemical, because everyone believes that this is where your mood and behavior issues come from. Now, to some degree, that's true, but we need to better understand the mechanism. What we're taught clinically is your serotonin levels are off. You have anxiety, you have depression, take a pill. SSRIs, as they're called. They're actually meant to manage your serotonin uptake and manage your mood. So what is the actual mechanism? When we say manage your mood, does serotonin give you a good mood and the lack of serotonin give you a bad mood? When you look at your genetics and you see the LL, which means optimum serotonin, and you see LS, which means suboptimal, and SS means horrible, does that equal bad mood, or is there something in between? So here's what's in between. The mechanism is if you don't have the right length of receptor, the LL, which is the long version, and you don't bind serotonin properly, your brain has a difficult time prioritizing stimulus. So whatever's coming in, smell, sound, poke, door open, paper crumple, clock ticking, every single stimulus, can your brain actually prioritize and know what to give attention to or not? And if your serotonin is dysregulated, most likely not. Now, what does that mean? Irritable, frustrated, distracted, ADHD. Symptomatically, the student who's sitting at their desk that is serotonin dysregulated, who is constantly disrupted by, can you stop chewing your food? Can you stop making that sound with your pencil? Somebody asked me a question. Somebody's talking over there. Like every little input is given attention that it doesn't deserve. Now, you can start to apply this to different contexts. It can also be a superpower. Think about the lawyer. I can't tell you how many successful lawyers we've dealt with that have the SS, most suboptimal version of serotonin response, because due to their inability to prioritize stimulus, when they're reading an agreement or a contract or an email, they just see everything, every little detail. That's the thing you're paying them for. Figure it out for me, right? They see everything. They notice every T that needs to be crossed, every I that needs to be dotted, that the LL person doesn't see, because their brain can't prioritize stimulus. But in that context, they're using it as their innate superpower. And this is, again, what I said a few minutes ago, context is key. Where are you applying this? Are you using it to your benefit or your detriment? Depends on your context. Your wiring is designed to give you what your ancestors needed to flourish, and they likely did. But now you're not doing what they were doing, right? We have all changed our habits, and we're all sort of monoculture, mono habits. We all do the same thing, even though we're not all designed for the same thing. So serotonin dysregulation speaks to the spectrum of, I am high level, low detail, macro. I am high level, high detail, micro. It all matters to me. And now, because it all matters to me, it affects my mood. So the symptom of anxiety, depression, etc., comes from the chronic, everything bugs me. That person is annoying. These sounds distract me. People say I have ADHD. You don't have an attention deficit syndrome. ADHD is attention deficit. You actually have hyperattention. It's not that you have a difficulty in giving things attention. It's that you give everything too much attention, constantly moving on to the next thing. Picture a Disney movie with a squirrel, right? Yep. Like everything. That's what's happening in the brain. So now combine that. Now you start to layer and you start to combine with other neurochemicals. Now take the person that is SS, serotonin dysregulated, and combine that with the low dopamine, highly reward-seeking person, the fast neurochemical clearance, who is already next. Tell me what's next. And not only are they highly reward-seeking and everything that they did is not good enough anymore, and they want the next one and a bigger one and a better one, they're also reading into it at a highly nuanced level, and everything sort of gets their attention. This is where the profile gets highly exaggerated. Now, this is where words like anxiety become a lot more chronic. For someone that is serotonin dysregulated and is dopamine dysregulated and does have a noradrenaline response and does experience PTs and everything, PTSD and everything is trauma, these things compound and you start to see the avatar of who you are, right? And those things, again, in combination, can just be a more excessive burden or a more excessive superpower. Take me, for example. I am serotonin dysregulated. I am noradrenaline dysregulated. I am dopamine dysregulated. And there's more we're going to talk about, by the way. What has that given me? This tool of what we call high functioning anxiety. That is now my superpower that drives me to want to change the world. All I do from the minute I wake up to the minute I sleep, and sometimes even in my dreams, is work on fixing healthcare. It's a mission that I cannot stop. Right? It gives me that sense of reward. It also gives me that sense of altruism, of helping people because of my, call it EQ, from my noradrenaline dysregulation. it also feeds my ability to constantly be chewing at every little detail and fixing every problem that I see. Right. And sometimes it can be annoying to the people around me, like that's too much detail. We don't need to go there, but that detail matters to me. The opposite could also be true. And there's no good or bad. There's who are you and what are you doing with it? If I shifted roles and decided to work on a team in a 9 to 5 and didn't get that sense of reward and was constantly frustrated by the team members who didn't listen to me when I said, please cross the T and dot the I, please read that agreement again, please speak to this person in this way, please write this line in your note. And I didn't, that didn't translate into execution, I would be extremely frustrated. And I would be using words like anxiety, but a different version. It wouldn't be a high functioning anxiety, it would be a chronic anxiety, crushing, debilitating, right? So you can, again, start to see how you fit in these profiles and stack them and compound them to really know who you are, and then extract that superpower and become that person, the best version of yourself mentally. So we're going to move on and talk about BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor. Your BDNF speaks to your brain's ability to develop new neural pathways, your neurology, neurogenesis as it's called. Here's these pathways in the brain that have these synapses that connect them, and then information flows. Some people do this really efficiently, some people not so efficiently. Again, depending on your context, there's no good or bad. The outcome of this, the very simple clinical outcome is if you have bad BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor, you likely, and by the way, the bad is the AA, the good is the GG, meaning just how efficiently do you develop new neural pathways. Neuroplasticity is another word we use. The bad means you don't do a good job, which means you're less likely to recover efficiently from concussion. You're more likely to get a concussion. You are more likely to have risk of cognitive decline and behavioral issues as you age, if you're not dealing with the neuroplasticity and doing something to promote it. All of that can be dealt with because we now know the bad BDNF gene is causing that. And there's simple things you can do like sauna and mitochondrial stimulation and omega-3s. And there's a lot of things you can do. We're going to talk about some more solutions in a second. Now, where it's really implicit in what we're talking about is your mood. And again, we know this because we spent time clinically facing patients. Most genetic companies don't even know that this is true, that you can actually determine mood from BDNF. So what does it do? Where we said the adrenal-2B or noradrenaline response causes you to feel trauma, meaning the imprint, I remember the feeling. Poor BDNF causes you to give it a lot more meaning, shell shock. There's a difference between trauma and shell shock. Trauma is I remember what it felt like. Shell shock is like it means a lot. That bomb exploded and I can't stop thinking about it, ruminating. I'm lying on my pillow at night and I can't sleep because I shouldn't have said this, and I should have done this, and I should have sent the email by now, ruminating. So when you give things a lot of meaning, again, innate superpower, serious crutch, depending on your context. Now the opposite, the optimal BDNF, much less likely to get a concussion, much easier to recover, much easier to learn new skills. The person with the suboptimal BDNF is a little more challenged in doing new things. Now you start to see when the person gets into their groove and becomes the best version of themselves, the person with the suboptimal BDNF, picture an author, picture the scientist in the lab, the person with blinders on that says, this is the way things happen and there's no other way. And I'm really, really good at this. But ask me to do this and I will fumble. But once I figure this out, I will also do better than anyone. Versus this, blinders wide open. Yeah, that works, that works. Yeah, I'll do the marketing. I'll do the legal. Yeah, I'll go speak on stage. Yeah, I'll also help the admin staff today because we're short. The person that does not have the challenge wearing multiple hats. Again, neither one is better than the other. It depends if you're using it for the purpose it was given to you, that gift that it was given to you for. We do see brilliant scientists and brilliant authors, and brilliant artists that are BDNF suboptimal, that are hyper focused on what they do and do a really good job of it because they develop these really dense and important neural pathways, but they haven't developed the other ones. right? But we also see these jack of all trades that do a really good job of everything. I can learn how to be the best basketball player, and I can very easily translate that into boxing or into hockey or into soccer, versus I box, give me a hockey stick, I don't know what to do, right? That ability to develop new neural pathways and learn new skills and apply it. So in terms of mood, we find that there's this subtle nuance. In your report, there's a gene called TPH. And the TPH gene can turn on, there's a phenomenon called epistasis. So far we looked at a variation. On some location in the gene, a letter was spelt wrong, so the gene is functioning different. Then we looked at an insertion or deletion. There's a chunk of the gene missing. Then there's something called epistasis, where one gene is causing another gene to change its outcome. You have the GG, best version of BDNF. If you also have the TPH, look in your report, then epistasis kicks in and it turns the BDNF off. Now, how is this expressed? Not in the context of the neuroplasticity and learning new skills and the brain development. It's more in the context of mood. These people still have what we call the drama queen response. Things mean a lot. Lawyer letter in the mail, do I put it down and say, I'm busy right now, I'm going to deal with this later, or shut the doors, everyone out, I have to deal with this? Drama queen response. Crying over spilt milk. That's when things mean a lot. So this is what the TPH phenomenon does, is it shuts the good BDNF off and changes the way you're experiencing meaning and giving maybe perhaps too much meaning. So now in all of this, you can start to see these pieces of components of what makes up how you perceive the world, right? You can start to imagine, well, here's who I actually am. Now I get it. I resonate with that feeling, and the gene result is equaling what I resonate with. I get it now. It's not a habit. It's not nurture. It's my hardwiring. The neurochemicals of my brain create my perception of reality. They create my mood. They create my ability to cope with whatever I'm experiencing. And here's how I experience those neurochemicals, which now directly explains all of what I just said. How I experience, how I cope, all of that, right? Which then equals your mood, your personality, who you are, how you're seeing the world, how the world sees you. Now, this stuff doesn't end here. Single genes don't have single outcomes. And this is why functional genomics is so much more powerful than genetics. Genetics is BDNF means neuroplasticity. Okay, that's true. The science is BDNF means good or bad neuroplasticity. Now, what is the application of that? The things we talked about, mood, shell shock, ruminating, right? That's not genetics, that's functional interpretation, because we spent time with patients. We know what it means. There's also certain genes cross over and affect other systems. And in this context, we're going to talk about sleep. The neurochemicals in your brain truly affect the quality of your sleep. BDNF is not only a regulator of mood and neuroplasticity, it's also a regulator of your circadian rhythm, your internal clock. Everybody walks around with an internal clock that tells your body what time it is in relationship to the sun, right? We are meant to be beings that are aligned with sunlight, meaning we're meant to wake up and get sunlight immediately. There's a reason why the UVA and UVB rays are much less potent in the morning when we're supposed to get up and work. They can't make you sick at that time. They make you sick in the middle of the day when we're supposed to take a break and eat, right? So if you look at the cycle of our ancestors and then you look at our relationship with the sun, things start to add up and make sense. Now, if your BDNF is broken, then that internal clock just doesn't work so well. It's missing a battery or two. So what does that mean? That means that you might not fall asleep on time. So a very specific problem of, I'm lying on my pillow and some nights it's fine, and some nights it's like, I just can't fall asleep. I can't stop thinking. I can't stop ruminating, right? Or if I don't have the exact routine, if I don't wake up on time, get my sunlight on time, go for my evening walk on time, I can't sleep that night. Because your circadian rhythm is driven by your habits if it's broken. If you have an efficient BDNF, GG, then your circadian rhythm likely is quite efficient and you recover from jet lag faster. Your body can adjust faster. You can have an oddball, irrational day and still fall asleep on time. You know, your clock will just do its job independent of the habits that are influencing your body, versus there's a high level of influence. Waking up 20 minutes late is going to screw up your sleep that night. Forgetting to go for your evening walk is going to screw up your sleep that night. So for those people that are suboptimal BDNF, you have to make a conscious effort to have that structure. And here's the ideal structure. You wake up, right? And you're getting sunlight immediately. The first 20 minutes of your day, that's what it is. You're truly charging yourselves when the four spectrums of light, the blue, green, red, yellow enter your body. They actually charge four receptor stations in your mitochondria. Your mitochondria uniquely has these four receptor sites that take these four spectrums of light and give you the energy and charge a true voltage to manage the day. This is why that morning light is important, especially if your BDNF is off. You need to pause 2 or 3 times a day just to breathe, to signal to your body. Remember, our ancestors did this. They stopped to meditate. They stopped to pray. It's only in a few recent generations that we stopped these habits. But for the most part, our ancestors all did this. They all stopped to pause and breathe and pray or even take a nap. So those pauses during the day are important to signal to the bad BDNF that the day is continued, the day is continued, the day is continued. Evening movement. And I don't mean running on a treadmill, and I don't mean lifting tons of weights. I mean low intensity, walking, yoga, stretching. This is, again, ancestral habits. They would eat and they would walk and they'd move around and they would play. It was family time. They were done with the hunt. They ate and they'd be moving light, low intensity, but long duration, right? It was playtime. We don't do that anymore. It's like sit in front of the TV time, right? There's also things that are more acute in nature, like sauna, red light therapy, high-grade omega-3. These are things that keep BDNF optimal and keep that clock ticking. Again, we can go a lot deeper. By the way, I know some of you had emailed us asking about our clinical programs with very specific questions about depression, anxiety, etc., not sleeping. The intention here today is to cover for you all of what we know about what these genes mean so that you can go self-interpret. If you feel you need support, if you feel like here's a problem I'm trying to solve, like I just don't sleep and I don't think that I'm going to figure this out on my own, or my problem sounds a little bit more complicated than this, I need to dive deeper. There's a lot deeper we can dive, by the way. I can talk about the brain alone for 6 hours straight if we had the time, right? There's a lot deeper we can go. Or it's like, well, you know, my mom had Alzheimer's. This is a big thing that I want to deal with and prevent. For all of those things, I would say in the chat, we'll drop in one of our team members at some point today, contact info, so that you can figure out how coaching and our practitioner time works. Again, this is for those people that have those sorts of questions, like the clinical, like I need some help, I need support. And I'm just stopping to say that now, because after all of what we said, I'm sure some of you are thinking, oh, but I need to go deeper here. I need to know more about that. I need help with this. The help is available. It doesn't end here, just so you know, the help is available. If you need clinical time, you can book whatever you need, from, you know, phone calls all the way to multi-month programs. If you want to do a deep executive dive and just figure out everything, it's possible. And we'll drop in some information for you about that later. I just want to pause that so that you're not busy thinking about that and you can actually take in what we're talking about here today. You will get that information. Okay, so bad BDNF. Now the circadian clock is fixed, you've adopted some of the right habits, all of a sudden you are falling asleep on time consistently, right? There's another problem, which is actually a much bigger problem. Some people say that, well, I don't really have a problem falling asleep, but 3 a.m., it's not the same after that. Every night after 3 a.m., I'm tossing and turning, I'm in and out of sleep. It's very light. It's very easy to disturb my sleep and wake me up. I don't even remember what happened in the first 3 hours. It was so deep and intense. But the next 3 to 6 hours is like, I don't get it. It's not the same. Well, serotonin, being this receiver of stimulus, this filter this prioritizer. It's supposed to tell you what to focus on. If you're not doing well there, LS or SS, which means you can't prioritize stimulus, that's also happening in your sleep. So we know that we take melatonin to fall asleep. Melatonin is this hormone and neurochemical that we use. Your brain binds it, you use it, and then that helps you fall asleep. Serotonin is the neurochemical your body uses to wake up. It's actually made in your gut. About 70% of it is made in your gut in that second half of sleep at that time where your sleep is being disrupted. Now, your brain is waiting for a signal to wake up. Ancestrally, we would wake up when the light came out, when the sunlight pierced through our eyelids and we saw the sunlight, and then the serotonin would start to get bound, and then you truly be awake. Our challenge now is in our sleeping conditions, there's too much stimulus. It's too hot, it's too cold. There's a blanket touching my neck, there's a pillow going in my ear. Hubby's foot touched me, hubby pulled the blanket too hard. Dog barking, neighbors making noise. Every single stimulus, your brain in that second half, when it's waiting for the stimulus of sunlight to know it's now time to get up, your brain is responding to every single one of those stimulus saying, is it time to get up? Oh no. Is it time to get up? Oh, not yet. Is it time to get up? Oh, no sunlight. Go back to sleep. And that second half is truly disrupted. Now, this is a vicious cycle where as you age, compounds on itself, because every night of disrupted sleep means lower and lower levels of serotonin, because that's the time when you make serotonin. In that time, that second half of sleep, that's literally when it happens. So if you're not sleeping, you're not making your neurochemicals, you're not making your hormones. You know, the first half of sleep, by the way, is more about recovery. It's lymphatic drainage of the brain. Let's get rid of every toxin that was entered into our cranium, into our brain. Lymphatic drainage of the body. Let's get rid of everything that our limbs is dealing with. Glutathione. Let's bind onto heavy metals and toxins and get rid of everything. The second half is more preparation. Let's get ready for the next day. Let's make everything we need, make our hormones, make our neurochemicals. Let's get ready. And you're not doing that if you're not sleeping properly. And this is a serotonin dysregulation issue. So the solution isn't the same thing. And the people that are saying, well, I'm doing everything right. I'm taking my melatonin, I'm taking my magnesium. Why is my sleep still disrupted? Because you're solving the wrong problem. You don't have a problem falling asleep. You have a problem staying asleep. And the problem is related to an inability to prioritize stimulus and overreacting to stimulus versus the sleep itself. This is why personalization is so key. And this session we were having here tonight is so important, because you can start to understand that your problem isn't the pain point you're feeling. It's some innate biological failure. And you resolve the biological failure, the pain point is a byproduct that goes away. I can't sleep as a byproduct of my brain can't prioritize stimulus, so I'm constantly waking up. It's not that I can't sleep, it's that I keep waking up. Two different problems. So the solution is different. You need to remove the stimulus. You do need blackout blinds that eliminate the light. You do need a nice eye mask that prevents light coming in. You do need earplugs if you have kids getting ready in the morning. You do need a separate blanket. You perhaps even need a separate mattress. I can tell you that there's some people we work with that were chronically ill, that had serious health conditions, and we had to tell them to please sleep in a different mattress from your spouse, at least for a few months, while we're dealing with the acute situation that you're in and trying to get you to a better state. Remember, get yourself to good health, and all of a sudden you're metabolically and cellularly more flexible. You can handle more. But if you're already inflamed and not making chemicals and not making hormones and you're sick, then you cannot handle much. You're already past that tipping point. The bucket of load that you can handle is already full. So the goal is to get you metabolically and cellularly flexible where you can handle day-to-day problems, right? No problem at that point. So there may be even a question of sleeping in a separate bed. All of this removal of stimulus and the addition. So if you look at your report, serotonin is regulated by the 5-HTT-LPR gene. 5-HTT-LPR, right? There's a supplement called 5-HTP, fairly common. It's given to people for anxiety because it regulates the serotonin receptor and pathway and allows you to experience more serotonin.
So there's two things you can do supplement wise. Add some 5-HTP right before going to sleep so that your brain is binding efficiently, and perhaps add a sleep supplement that gets you into a deeper sleep state. It's not about knocking you out and putting you to sleep. It's more about keeping you in a deep sleep state. We make something called Sleep Optimizer that works on getting you in the right brain wave state. Qualia makes some great sleep products. There's things like Brain Tap that you can use that get you into the right brainwave state. There's things like Apollo Neuro that work on your neurology. You put on your wrist, you put on your ankle, and it puts vibration and frequency into your body, which regulates your sleep. So there's a lot of things you can do in terms of solutions, but you need to know what to do. What is my actual problem? Not the symptom. What is the biological failure, and how do I resolve that? The problem goes away, right? So now with all of that, you've now understood that when we look at the genes, you look at the reports that we provide you in the 360, those are the things that everybody asks about. Those are the things that we know that everybody can work on. Those are the things that we know that you can go ahead and self-serve and take the recommendations and reports, apply them, and you'll probably become a better version of yourself. Meanwhile, there may be nuances or very specific concerns, or environmental challenges. There may be something in your lifestyle that's so much of a burden that you can't do what's being recommended. So there's nuances. Everybody has a personalized scenario. So this is why we wanted to open the floor to Q&A. And I can already see that there's 13 questions here. So I'm going to start with those. If you have any additional questions based on what we just talked about, the genes themselves, the outcomes, the problems, the solutions, drop them in the Q&A. I'll go through all of them. This next hour is for you, and for that purpose, this is your chance to, whatever that thought was, whatever that thing was that you just couldn't figure out, we're going to do that here for you today. So I'm going to open the Q&A box. Catherine, can you go through each of the combos quickly for comp and DRD2? Yeah, so I'm not sure I heard comp, AG, and DRD2. So what we said is I spoke to the extremes, right? So DRD2 AA means lowest possible dopamine receptors. I can't get no satisfaction. DRD2 AG means I feel it as it should be. I'm not underly satisfied and I'm not overly stuck or flaky because I'm getting it the way it should be. GG means my receptors are a little too dense and it's too easy for me to feel. So I'm not really driven by reward and pleasure because I just get it so easily. Everything causes it, right? So that's the feeling. Now, how long does it last? Right? It's the opposite now. GG means that it moves very quick. It doesn't last long enough. And now not only am I feeling it way down here, but it didn't last long enough. So all of a sudden it's this like highly addictive tendency because it didn't feel it and it's gone before it started, driving me towards addiction, depression, all of these things, right? So, and the opposite is also true where it may be the AA comp that's so slow that I get stuck. So now that I've armed you with this, you can start to look at the various pieces and figure it out yourself. That's the intention tonight, is to teach you what these things mean. And you might say, well, here's this and here's that. If this gets toggled a little this way, this person might start to feel like this. Because this is not, remember, this is not prescriptive, like measuring with a ruler, you are 12.25 centimeters. This is a gene that drives biological process, which means you feel approximately like this, which means there's room for interpretation. You're not going to precisely feel exactly like this, but you're going to be, in terms of the spectrum, leaning more towards this, right? So there's room for interpretation. Christy asks, what is epistatic phenomenon? I have the GGTPH, GGBDNF. Yes, I have to work at mentally and emotionally stepping back before I lash out in irritation. I get irritated at least once a day, frustration, irritation, mental state, emotional state, and serving evolutionary purpose. So yes, so what you're experiencing is you have the really good BDNF, but you have the TPH turning off, which means you give things a lot of meaning. It means that when something impactful happens, whether it's good or bad, by the way, whether it's a funny joke or whether it's a slap in the face, both things you're giving too much meaning to. versus Steven Seagal or Chuck Norris is a better example. Chuck Norris taking the slap in the face and continuing the conversation, right? That's high BDNF. It doesn't mean much. Let's move on. The same is true of good news. The people that everything is so good, like, oh, wow, this is so good. Let's go do it. Let's go do it. That is suboptimal BDNF because they're giving it too much meaning versus, yeah, I heard you, but I'm not too worried about it. Like, yeah, that TV show is pretty good, but it's okay. I'm busy right now, right? The low meaning. So that's really what we're talking about is that when your TPH is GG, you're still experiencing the mood issues of giving things too much meaning, too much weight, which then if you combine that with the PTSD response could equal trauma because not only did you feel the feeling, but there's a burden, there's a weight on your shoulders because of the meaning. So that's to answer Christie's question. So now Monica, DRD2AG, we just talked about that. That's that middle ground. Now I know Monica, by the way, and Monica has an amazing business. I won't say where, just to not give up her privacy, but she deals in construction. And it's very interesting that somebody who gets things done as they should be, AG, I'm not overly reward seeking and I'm not overly flaky, is succeeding in construction because she's doing exactly what needs to be done. She's not overly reward seeking where she's distracted by, oh, I want to build this, I want to do that. What about this? What about that? It's like, no, this is the job. And she's also not underly reward seeking where she just flakes off and doesn't do it. She's like, I understand the drawings, I understand the need, I will finish my job, I'll call you when I'm done. That's Monica, right? That's AG, Zen with reward. I will do what needs to be done, both with my family, both with food, both with my work, both with drink and entertainment. I will just do what needs to be done as it should be. I experience food as the level of pleasure it was meant to deliver. I don't say no and I don't say yes. I do what needs to be done, right? So that's Monica. Mary said, will EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprogramming be more effective someone who's ID versus DD? Okay, so now this is an amazing question because the same answer is true of everything. Every single thing you now choose to do, whether it's a supplement or whether it's a app or whether it's a digital device or whether it's a practice like what Mary's talking about, right? She's talking about a protocol that people use to fix something. You now know why there's variable outcome. If someone has the DD ADR2B, there's just a lot more work to do because the way they experience trauma is so much more in-depth and comprehensive versus the II person takes one session and says, I'm good. And then all of a sudden it's like, wow, that thing works amazing. Why didn't it work for me? It did work for you. You just need 6 sessions instead of 1 because you're not II, you're DD. The way you experience trauma is 6-fold the way that person's experiences trauma, right? So that this is the same answer for any question that's going to sound like this is, what do you think about this supplement? What do you think about this red light therapy? What do you think about this hyperbaric chamber? The truth is all of those things work. Who needs it? There's 2 questions to answer. Do I need it? Every podcast you listen to, every YouTube show, every influencer, they all have something great to say that work for them and it's true. Do you need it? That trial and error, that one size fits all, where I did what they said, why didn't it work for me? Because maybe you're solving the wrong problem. Just like we said about sleep, maybe melatonin isn't what you need. It's not a fall asleep problem, it's a stay asleep problem. Same thing is true here. So question number 1, do I actually need it? Is this part of my biology broken? Am I fixing the right problem? Second, if I do need it, what should be my expectations? Because I now know how to understand my biology. And to what degree is this thing affecting me? Am I 8 out of 10 or 2 out of 10 based on the genetics? And when it comes to trauma and binding emotive experiences, the DD person is going to be much further down the line and needs a lot more work. So you can start to use this and interpret and apply, right? So Courtney's asking, what about AA COMT and the II? So AA COMT, again, is the very slow clearance. So you're going to see people that have, again, when you have the II ADR2B, it means that you're not really binding the, call it trauma or feeling. But if your COMT is slow, you were still in the moment for quite a long time. And you still remember a lot about it. The details are prevalent. And that can, again, cause frustration because you're seeing this thing and you're remembering things and you're knowing things that people around you don't remember, right? And like, no, this is what happened. Like, no, it didn't really go on that way. Like, yeah, you said this at this time. No, it wasn't really like that. No, that's exactly what you said, because the calm is slow, you remember a lot more. Or the opposite is true. The calm is really fast. It's a GG, and you sort of plow through. And if you have the I just to be where feeling and trauma doesn't mean much, you're gonna truly appear to be cold to people. You're gonna truly feel like a robot. It doesn't mean you didn't feel or you didn't know or notice. It just means it is not a tool for you to use. You park that feeling and you go straight to the logic and the IQ, because that's how your brain is wired. Again, a great superpower, given the context, a big crutch when it comes to things like relationships where suppose as a spouse, somebody's expecting empathy from you. This just happened to me. Move on. I'm not ready to move on. Right now, imagine that friction. So knowing this about yourself, knowing this about your partner, knowing this about your kids, how do you discipline them? The kid who holds on to trauma, where you walk in the room and yell, versus the kid who doesn't hold on to trauma at all. The kid who holds on to trauma for the next 2 days is watching you like, oh, I'm not going to do this again. And then the other one within 5 minutes is doing the same thing again, because they just don't feel the pain. They don't remember it. When you walk into the room yelling again, they don't associate the two. Right? So again, start to use this and apply and interpret. Does TPH turn off the bad BDNF? No, it turns off the good BDNF. So if you have the GG TPH, it turns off the GG BDNF. That's what it does. It does not turn off the AA or bad version BDNF. That stays the same, which means either way, if you have bad BDNF or GG combination, you're going to feel it. The difference is if you truly actually have the genetic poor BDNF, not only are you experiencing the mood issues, but you're also experiencing the actual hardware failure. The neuroplasticity isn't there, right? So you have to look at that also. Okay, Mary's asking, so if mood and perceptions are hardwired, do meditation and gratitude? Yes. Here's the beauty of all this. This is why I said in the very beginning that your outcome is a choice, right? Like I said, if you do your low intensity movements in the evening, then your bad BDNF is not going to prevent you from sleeping. It's not going to ruin your mood. If you take a hot shower in the morning, that one simple act, hot shower in the morning, it's going to boost your BDNF levels, and then you're not going to have a bad moody day. Simple fact. Because there's one thing, here's your genetics, and then here's the expression of those genetics. And this is the entire purpose of why we're meeting here tonight. Step one, find the red flags in your genetic report. Which gene is not doing the job it's supposed to do? Step two, now adopt the habits that you should have to prevent the problems you're trying to avoid. That's it. It's that simple. And for every gene that we've provided you data on, you're able to now do this. I'm looking at this gene. Does it do its job properly? Yes or no? If not, what could this lead to? Now that I know I don't want that outcome, what are the things that I can do to intervene? That's what you're going to be thinking about from now on. And you can solve any future health or wellness problem. You can prevent or you can reverse, because you now know what to prioritize. Here's the gene that doesn't do its job. I'm going to focus on that gene. And I now know how to alter the outcome because the reports gave you recommendations. The reports told you, oh, you have anxiety, do this. You have what we call neuroticism, do this. But here in this setting where we're speaking tonight, you're reading beyond those words, procrastination and neuroticism. You're understanding the genes and biological processes that drive the outcome of neuroticism. It's bad BDNF. So here's all the things I can do to upregulate my BDNF, right? So that's the big answer, Mary. And thank you for the question. So yes, meditation upregulates BDNF. Cold temperature upregulates dopamine. If you feel anxiety, depression, go in a cold plunge, go skiing, and you won't feel it anymore, right? Serotonin dysregulation can be managed by healing the gut, where your serotonin is made. So eat clean foods and allow your gut to thrive, and all of a sudden you have more serotonin, right? So a lot of things you can do. All we're saying is we now know where to prioritize and what to focus on. Mary's saying, will time outside in the morning first thing if you wear glasses when you are outside? So when it comes to the relationship of your eyes and the sun, it is very important for your eyes to receive sunlight. This practice we have of wearing sunglasses is it's breaking biology that's meant to be protective. When your eyes meet the sun, you instantly start producing melanin. Melanin is the chemical that prevents you and protects your skin from getting damaged from the sun. It's because we're wearing sunglasses all the time and our eyes don't see the sun that we're not making enough melanin, that we're getting burnt. It's because our food is so inflammatory and our skin is so inflamed. We have too many seed oils and omega-6s in our food that our skin is inflamed and we're getting things like skin cancer. You know, there's science where they've done animal research where we've taken animals and fed them a North American diet, which is carb and toxic food rich. And they've taken the same number of animals and fed them a nutrient dense, high quality diet. And the animals that ate the garbage North American food, 25% of them got skin cancer. The animals that ate a nutrient dense meal and went outside had 0 skin cancer. So skin cancer isn't the result of sun exposure. It's a result of having 0 nutrition in your food. And on top of that, having highly inflammatory toxic food, and then walking out into the sun with inflamed skin. Same thing is true of your relationship with the sunlight in terms of this 20 minutes. Yeah, you need that first 20 minutes. And I know what your question was, do I need to go outside? So sunlight comes through the window. You know, being outside feels different. You know, get your feet on the ground and ground yourself also. It's a great thing to do. But sure, sunlight through your window, unless you have UV protection, you know, you're going to get the full spectrum. Keep in mind, there's 4 spectrums of light that come from the sun. And if you have some kind of filter on your window, which some windows do, you're not getting all 4 spectrums. You're not getting that full charge, right? So that's the only question you need to ask yourself. Does my window actually have a spectrum of some, or filter of some sort or not? So Agnes is asking, can we learn anything from osteoporosis? Yeah, for sure. So your vitamin D pathway, we're not talking about that today. Today, we're talking about mood, right? So we're not talking about bone health. We will be talking about that, I believe, on the next call. Definitely, we will. Agnes, the intention here is to give everybody the time they needed for mood and behavior. So I'll urge you, attend the call for chronic disease, and we will talk about osteoporosis. It's a big question that everybody asks, and definitely we have a lot we can say about that. Evan, should 5-HTP supplement before bed? So you could, there's multiple purposes for it. So 5-HTP, you can keep taking it, right? You can take it 3-4 times a day. You can take it at night. You can take it if you wake up in the middle of the night also. There's some people, young people, that we tell them to take it 3-4 times a day so that their teachers stop telling them that they have ADHD. And they don't have ADHD. They have a serotonin dysregulation, and their classroom is not designed for them to thrive. So let's give them the tools they need. Yes, take it right before sleep. It does not disrupt your sleep. It's designed to regulate your serotonin, which would actually help you maintain a deeper sleep. And if you wake up in the middle of the night, take a pill. You know, and I'm not saying taking a sleeping pill, take some serotonin. Very safe and clean. It's just modulating serotonin levels, right? If you also do wake up in the middle of the night, very important not to cause a stress response, because the second half of serotonin dysregulation is cortisol production. So your body truly wakes up when the serotonin is bound and you start to make cortisol to start your day, a stress hormone, right? Once you do that, it's very, very hard to fall asleep, very hard. So if you do wake up in the middle of the night, don't start thinking, and I know it's an easy thing to say, but it's hard to do. What you should do is just do some deep breathing. Signal to your brain that this is not work time, this is not morning time, this is sleep time. Just into the nose, out through the mouth. Into the nose, out through the mouth. The deep, long breaths. It signals to your brain it's still relaxing time, right? Do not let the cortisol pump. Anonymous is asking, what suggestions do you have for managing BDNF GG, drama queen response solutions? Okay, yes to yoga. Yes to breathing, yes to ashwagandha. All 3 things you said. I would also say sauna. If you make it a habit of using the sauna, let me tell you an interesting anecdote. the Finnish people from Finland are the most genetically likely to have bad BDNF. It's almost 100% certain. If you're from Finland, ethnically Finnish, you're going to have bad BDNF, which means drama queen response, angry, irritable, right? Finland is rated the happiest country in the world. How does that add up? Well, as we said before, your epigenetic habits can augment your gene expression. We now know what to prioritize, right? So for someone that's you're describing, they need to prioritize this. Finnish people have more saunas per capita than any other population in the world. So they have this bad genetic suboptimability, which means they should be slapping each other and fighting all day long, which the Vikings did. They came around the world and killed a bunch of people, right? When they started using saunas, their BDNF suboptimability got upregulated and they didn't have the mood issues anymore. And now talk to someone from Finland and they don't feel right if they don't get their daily sauna. So it's become a cultural habit. This is what we're saying. If you plug in, know what to prioritize. If I don't get my sauna, I pick up a sword and take a boat to England and kill people as a Viking, or I do what makes me feel good and I'm calm, right? So now all of a sudden, yes to yoga in the evening specifically, yes to sauna in the evening, yes to a short walk, yes to a hot shower in the morning, yes to cold plunging, right? Let's get those neurochemicals firing properly. Yes to omega-3 oils, yes to ashwagandha. So let's upregulate all of what causes the thing that is off. Prioritize, implement habits. Those are the 2 steps for all these problems we're talking about. Anonymous also asked, I did find out I have extremely narrow palate, an overbite, narrow pathway. I'm wearing lower braces for expansion. I'm walking around with a paper bag over my head all day. So when it comes to the skull, right? This is extremely, extremely important and never spoken about when it comes to chronic disease. When it comes to chronic disease, we have seen people heal from fibromyalgia from breath work. We have seen people go from suicidal to superpower from breath work. Why? Because the shape of your skull and the way you breathe changes your chemistry throughout your body. And there's some people like yourself that have developed in a certain way that need breath work to fix it, right? So this is more in a structure thing, right? We're saying that your skull, your jawline is developed in a certain way. Now, there are some great practitioners that can support you with this. There's a gentleman named Cheng Ruan. He's a doctor out of Texas who has some amazing programs around breath work for changing the shape of the skull. He heals people through breath work, and he's a medical doctor, MD, by the way. He has a clinic. He's just discovered that he's been able to help so many people in this way that he's made it a priority for himself, right? So now we can bring this to light. We can do a talk with him, by the way. We can bring him on board and have a session with you guys if you'd like to enjoy that and bring them. We know him well. But this is very true. If you don't work on this, it's not just about I can't breathe. It leads to every system is interconnected. And the stressors that are caused from one leads to stressors in other places. And balance, this homeostasis is required everywhere. So if you're not breathing properly, you will experience other problems that a medical doctor will tell you are not related, and they are. Right? So if everyone votes and says yes, we'll bring Chenra on for a webinar and we'll teach you guys about that. MAO. So MAO, remember I said when it comes to dopamine, there's the anticipation, there's the feeling. Anticipation is I smell the pizza. The feeling is I bit the pizza. Then there's the breakdown, and then there's the clearance. So MAO is the breakdown in between DRD2 and COMT. So TT is the slow version, and GG, I believe, is the fast version. So now what this does is just creates an additional nuance to what we talked about before. I talked to you about the core genes, the most important things to look at, right? So that you can get going. Now, MAO just nuances it a little bit more. If you also have the super fast MAO along with the super fast COMT, it's even faster. It's even more of a problem, right? If you have the super fast comp with a slow MAO, maybe it's helping you slow it down a little bit. So go into your report, and when you're looking at this dopamine pathway, the TT is the slow version, the GG is the fast version, and that's just going to pull things. It's more of a supporting character, let's say, and it's going to pull things in a direction versus be the major cause. So I would look at it that way. Once you've understood things from a dopamine, DRD2, and comp level, then go look at MAO to see how is it sort of pulling things and altering this a little bit. It's just a nuance, right? Joan is asking how to remedy getting very high meaning to everything. It's all of what we just said about BDNF. We just talked about that. So upregulating breathing exercises, breath holding, sauna, low intensity exercise, hot shower in the morning, cold plunging, omega-3, fats, fatty foods for the brain, avocado, etc. Your brain needs fat. These are the ways you upregulate BDNF. The other thing you could do is focus on mitochondrial health. Remember, there's a really high density of mitochondria in your brain. So if you're to focus on stimulating mitochondrial health through supplementation or exercises, which are easy to find, our coaches, by the way, are really good at that. If anyone here is in a coaching program, you'll know that we can work on mitochondria and solve this problem at a personalized level for somebody. Adrian is asking, what is the interpretation of MAO? We just talked about that. Russ is asking, what is the other supplement you said besides HTP for the best sleep at night? We make something called Sleep Optimizer. So whereas 5-HTP is more of a serotonin regulator, our product keeps you in a deep sleep state. So it's more about keeping you there. I use it once in a while. So I've done a lot of work on myself, and I fixed things, and I now sleep a lot better than I used to. But there are certain days where I know, based on the habits of the day or two prior to, that my sleep may be disrupted. And so I'll take on those days of Sleep Optimizer. I used to take it every day. And the thing with supplements, cycling on and off is a good thing, right? The intention is not for you to be on things forever, unless it's hormones, where you likely do need to be on it forever because your hormones are just off, right? Everything else you can cycle on and off. So when I take Sleep Optimizer, I end up having these deep, vivid dreams, these like highly colorful, like, wow, I'm in an IMAX theater type dreams. And it's almost like entertainment because I'm in such a deep sleep state, right? So the REM and the quality of sleep. And now I realize what's possible for sleep quality. And it's a very healthy place to be. And I also noticed that I need less time. We think that we need 8 hours of sleep. We actually need 2 hours of REM, 2 hours of deep, and another 2 hours for recovery. So it's about 6 hours, but it usually takes us 8 hours to get those 6 hours. When I was really focused on sleep health and using the Sleep Optimizer, I was getting those 6 hours in 6 hours. It was very efficient. So that's the other supplement I was talking about. Lisa's asking, can psychedelics, psilocybin, MDMA change genes expression? Yes, I would say psilocybin and psychedelics are a very powerful tool, and your words are the right words, rewiring tools, right? So psilocybin and microdosing, these are some of the most powerful tools to rewire the brain exponentially fast. It's funny that there's simple things like walking and exercise that are very powerful. The best antidepressant drug that we have today works 40% of the time on depression. The best drug. Walking 10,000 steps a day works 80% of the time. Twice as well as the best antidepressant drug. There's clinical studies to prove this, but of course it's not profitable, so nobody tells us to do it. So there are a lot of things you can do, but yes to psychedelics. Psychedelic, very powerful, and the outcomes are quick. If you're dealing with trauma, pain, you may enter a release type moment where it's very painful to go through. But that is kind of like breaking down a wall that when you get to the other side of it, it's an amazing place to be. So go through the pain to get the pleasure, right? It's kind of like that. But I 100%, so I've never done it. I've been around people that have done it, and I've been part of, call it, research, experiments to see the outcome. And I agree that it's powerful. Lori asked, BDNF, TPH, GT. The GT does not have the epistatic phenomenon, only the GG. Katie asked, can you explain COMT, GG, and DRD2 GG? So when you have the DRD2 GG, it means that you have the very high expression of dopamine receptors. So very easy for you to experience pleasure, sorry, which means you're more likely to not be interested, not be motivated. But when you are, you're deeply motivated. And then if you have the GG COMT, it means that it doesn't last long enough. This leads to, by the way, a very healthy profile. We've studied hundreds of people, and I can tell you, a lot of the people that we've seen that are that millionaire level, right? Meaning they're not highly reward-seeking billionaires, right? That made stupid, crazy risks, that had crazy wins. But think of more the fund manager, the doctor that owns a couple of clinics that is doing well entrepreneurially. We'll often see this combination of the high DRD2 with the fast COMT, because they're not struggling with receiving pleasure reward. So they're not saying yes to everything. It's easy for them to say no, which is very important to achieve success. It's easy for them to say no, but it doesn't last long. So it's easy for them to multitask, multi-prioritize, multi-focus, multi-entry point, like give me more information, you give me information, you give me information. But they end up succeeding. We see this consistently. The people that are at that, like, let's call it millionaire to multimillionaire level, not the crazy successful, and also not the 9 to 5. This drives that thinking. That's what we see commonly. Anonymous is asking, COM to GG, so the fast clearance, adder to BII. I use emotion. I'm surprised. So what you're saying is you use emotion over logic, right? You have the fast clearance and the adder to BII. What does your BDNF say? Because sometimes people confuse trauma with shell shock. Those are two different things. Trauma is I remember the feeling. I remember what it felt like, right? Shell shock is I remember the information, the scenario, the weight, the burden, the meaning. And that can sometimes be confused with emotion. So what is your BDNF? And also, what is your serotonin? Because irritability and distractibility also gets confused as emotion. There's a difference between I remember the feeling, right? I remember what it felt like when you hurt me, and I feel like that right now. Versus stop bugging me. Those are two different things. Versus I can't continue because I can't breathe right now. This is too much. That's a different thing. So take a look, if you don't mind, Anonymous, drop in your BDNF and serotonin results. It may be coming from there. And again, if your serotonin is dysregulated, causes people to read into things too much and give value to things that, overread into the details, right? So you may be thinking that there's an emotional response that isn't even there. This often happens, by the way. So let's look at that. Drop in your results for that and we'll look at that. William is saying COMT AA slow, so GG Zen. Experienced a terrible situation a year ago. It was amazing at the time, but now I'm a mess. Cannot snap out of it. Is this a genetic emotional concern? Should I consider antidepressants? So your COMT is really slow, and that's likely where it's coming from. Wilena experienced a terrible situation a year ago. I was amazing at the time, but now I'm a mess. I cannot snap out of it. Why? Because your COMT is so slow that it's hard. You remember so much information. Can't snap out of it. Means you're ruminating. You're thinking about it, right? So the way to deal with that, there are ways. So, Wilena, your example. Keep in mind, everything you've heard me say today, I provided an answer. Right? People are asking questions. I provided an answer. I said, you say this, here's the answer. Your case, I would highly, highly recommend working on coaching. Why? Because it's clinical in nature and it's not just the genes you're talking about. It's also serotonin, it's also BDNF. And because I know that we can fix it, because I'm confident that I've seen this type of thing before, and it's so powerful to know that we can actually help you, you're the person that should break out of this public forum of like, hey, just answer my question and take time and really work on this. because it's horrible, first of all, to be stuck in a place where you don't need to be stuck. Imagine feeling a certain bad way that you don't actually need to feel. That was the intention of why we're even interacting together, right? So Elena, I highly, highly, highly recommend, in your case particularly, reach out to us about coaching. I see Tracy's typing here right now. She's probably providing you information on who to talk to, right? Please, I would suggest for you to talk to someone, because we can work on that, and because it's much more complex than a simple, here's the answer, right? Even if I were to give you the answer, without the accountability and support of a functional genomics practitioner, you may not be able to implement it, right? It's hard to know where to start and where to end. So in your case, I recommend that. Jared asked about MAO. We already answered that. Monica, minor TMJ issue, scanning my head. My dentist found that my spot on my head that produced melatonin. Sorry. I was very super sensitive to sounds. Okay, so Monica, your issue, I would almost say the same thing. It's complex. It's a combination of clinical need and genetic. So in your case, it's not like this is happening because of this gene. It's more like, here's how we're going to fix this because of this gene, because you actually have a clinical issue. It's not just something you were born with, like you have the TMJ issue. It's another place where I would recommend we help you beyond just a simple answer. There may be a simple answer, and then you're not going to implement it properly, and it's not going to work, and you say, well, this didn't work. It requires more. Again, for most people, that's not what I said. For most people, I said, here's the answer. Take it home and run with it, and you'll be good. Your case, and again, Melena's case, I really recommend working with someone. Danelle, is there a combination of genes that cause a propensity to be more narcissistic? Yes, BDNF. So when your BDNF is suboptimal, we actually speak about narcissism in one of our reports, we speak about neuroticism, right? But the narcissism comes from a combination of, I have the high expression of dopamine, and I have the slow clearance. So I'm not reward seeking at all, and I'm not really looking for an answer. I'm already good. I'm satisfied. And when you try and tell me what's next or I don't need to know. I think I'm right already. Right? So that's one. Now add the bad BDNF to that, where the thinking is very rigid, right? It's like, no, it's like this. That's the way the world works. I don't agree with you. Combine those things and you get this narcissistic behavior. You get this like, I don't really care what you're saying because I'm not reward seeking and I don't need to hear it. I'm just good with where I'm at. And my adjective to be might be I, so I'm a little bit colder and I really don't care to deal with your feelings right now. Just tell me the information, right? So this combination we've seen over and over again leads to this, what we call narcissism. Now, there actually is a clinical narcissism, right? Where people have chemical imbalances and can't function, right? Majority of it is not that. Majority of any mood and behavior issue, depression, anxiety, don't exist. They are all of what we're talking about with a context problem, including narcissism. It's this combination of high dopamine, slow clearance. I say no to everything because I'm not reward seeking. It's adder to be I don't really care about your feelings because it's not a filter that I use. And it's like BDNF is off. So I also believe that the way that I think is the only way things happen. Narcissism, right? That's the outcome of that. We've seen it over and over again. And usually the easiest way to fix it is starting with the BDNF. Let's heal the meaning first. Then we get to the comp and speed that up a little bit. Denise is asking if you have a reduced efficiency for making serotonin and slow degradation of serotonin. What would that make? Would that give you a normal serotonin level? Is that wishful thinking? So if you're reduced efficiency for making serotonin and slow degradation, would that give you normal serotonin levels? The primary and first place we go to is the 5-HTT-LPR gene to understand the length of the receptor. That's the thing that has the biggest impact on serotonin levels, not in terms of actually measuring how much serotonin is in your blood, but the functional answer of how much are you using. It doesn't matter how much you have if you're not using it, right? So the functional answer is serotonin receptors first, 5-HTT-LPR, then yes to TPH, which is a sort of a supporting character for that pathway, right? So if you have the GT or the TT, you're not doing such a good job there also. And then that might be compounded. So it's more like 80% of the problem, we look at 5-HTT-LPR, and then this is augmenting it. The TPH is also driving that a little bit more. So yeah, it's wishful thinking. I would start with the serotonin regulation, which is a 5-HTT-LPR, and go from there. Courtney is asking, you mentioned omega-3s, 5-HTP, what brands? Okay, so we actually make a product, an omega-3 product, which is not our own. There's a company called NutraSea, which we believe in, because first of all, their sourcing, it's all Norwegian, so very healthy, clean, toxin-free fish. They are very, very specific on how they press and process. Some of you may have noticed that when you take an omega-3, you get like a gross fishy burp or there's a gross fishy taste. You just can't handle it. So people, compliance is also important. It's one thing to tell you to do something. Another thing, like how long are you going to do it for, right? So if it's easy to do, you'll continue. And one of the things about easy to do, it's got to taste good. So if you have fish that is rancid and old and gives you a disgusting fishy burp, you're probably not going to stick to it. So there's a brand called NutraSea. We also use NutraSea. If you go to our website, there's an omega-3 product there. And you look at the ratios. So if you want to understand ingredients, look at the ratios of EPA, DHA, like it's all there. And that's what you'd be looking for. Go to our website, thednacompany.com, read the label. It's an amazing formula formulated by a gentleman who sold Canada's most important omega-3 company to a much bigger company, and he taught us how to make it. So it was sort of designed by him. Lisa's saying infrared or Finnish sauna, what's the difference? Big difference. The key difference is the Finnish sauna, the steam being in the box, is really good for your brain, Alzheimer's prevention, cardiovascular disease prevention. The infrared very specifically focuses on your mitochondria. So as a byproduct, if you charge your mitochondria and you have healthy mitochondria, you will have better cardiovascular health and better brain health and better everything, right? It's just not the same. When we've looked at the clinical outcomes, it's not the same as the traditional Finnish, especially when it comes to BDNF, when it comes to the brain and mood. The mood regulation is not the same. They're both good for detoxification, which is another side benefit, which is why it's so helpful with longitudinal health, right? So they both help with that. I would just say that what it does for your mood and your brain, you're getting more of that from the Finnish sauna. Bela's asking, I've woken up several times of the year panicking that I smell smoke, literally jump up waking, I have occasional bad dreams. Okay, Bela, are you the same Bela that was on our coffee call the other day? I asked this because I remember you were asking about perimenopause. Smelling phantom smells is a symptom of perimenopause. So when you smell smoke that isn't there, that is a symptom that your body is getting ready for menopause. That's what's happening. And if I remember correctly, Bela, if you don't mind, just make a note if you're the same Bela I talked to the other day. I think you are. This is what's going on. Okay, that's you. Great. Okay. That's what's happening. That's a symptom of perimenopause. It's not a well spoken of. It's much more common than people think. But again, women get so gaslit when it comes to their health, and women are so much over and over told, like, yeah, don't worry, it's menopause, not a big deal. Yeah, your hormones are crazy. Like, no, it's a very clear symptom of perimenopause. What's happening is your body is changing. And so you have to be diligent. Maybe there is smoke, but if there isn't, don't worry about it. It's something that's going to happen for the next few years, likely. And burning and smoke is the most common phantom smell that perimenopausal women smell, just so you know. Bad dreams, by the way, probably related to your gut. So if you have the LL serotonin, you're not doing bad there. But if your gut is in poor health, remember you make your serotonin in your gut. So if your gut health, look at the GSTM1 gene. We're not talking about that today. That's going to be on another call. But you're often tied to poor gut health, also often tied to poor metabolic health. I would try fasting in the evening. Stop eating minimum of 3 hours before sleep, like zero, nothing. Let your gut be empty when you get to sleep and see if that changes things. Mary, is this just the heat or is this the, sorry. Is it just the heat or is it heat followed by cold plunge? So if you just do a hot shower, that's enough to upregulate BDNF. That's all you need. The cold plunge will also upregulate dopamine, serotonin, all the cofactors, and you'll just feel even better, right? It also strips fat off your body for some people. It also upregulates blood flow to allow healing and nutrition delivery to the brain, right? Which also upregulates neurogenesis. So cold plunging is just a great overall tool. But the answer of do you need them both? The heat alone will do what we're talking about, upregulate BDNF. But if you add the BDNF, again, it's like an extra 20% level. It's like pro level, right? Lisa's asking, how do neurotoxins such as the Dysport and Botox impact mood and behavior, if at all? We are going to talk about this on the immunity and cellular health call. Yes, any toxin is going to affect your mood and behavior. Any toxin, depending on your ability to clear, detoxify, will lead to inflammation, including neural inflammation, right? Your brain will get inflamed, which will affect your mood. We will talk about on the immunity call. So the answer is yes. The specifics we're going to talk about on the cellular health call. Courtney, is Deep Calm Optimizer one of your supplements? Yes, so Deep Calm is kind of like sleep optimizer for during the day, managing your serotonin and other neurochemicals to prevent you from being overly stressed and producing too much chemicals, or sorry, too much cortisol hormone, stress hormone. Bisglycinate, so just the big answer, magnesium bisglycinate is a great tool for daytime, meaning that you want the relaxation of blood vessels. You want the muscle fiber to be relaxed. 3-8 is a great tool for sleep, right? So these are the big ones. There's a lot of other types of magnesium. These are the two big ones that we focus on: bisglycinate during the day and 3-8 at night for sleep. That's my big answer. Again, magnesium is a topic we could talk about for half an hour. There's so many different versions. Those are the key things you need to know. Focus on bisglycinate during the day and 3-8 for sleep. Are any of these genes in the mood behavior report associated with bipolar? Well, they are associated with what people call bipolar, which is not actually bipolar. For example, if your COMT is really fast and you clear your neurochemicals quickly, which means you also shift your priorities quickly, someone may call that bipolar. If your BDNF is off and you give things a lot of meaning and your mood can shift dramatically, people might call that bipolar, right? If your serotonin is off and you're highly irritable and you're in a context where there's a lot of stimulus constantly irritating you, people will call that bipolar. So this is why we're saying a lot of words that are used to describe mood and behavior issues that are describing them at the symptom level are not true. That may be the best way to describe the symptom. You are bipolar. You just flipped. Yeah, that's what I did. And that's a great way to describe it, but it's not a condition that I have. I have suboptimal BDNF. So when I was just laughing with you right now, and then I got the bad news and got very angry, that's just the way my brain works. I'm not bipolar. I'm just much more responsive to negative and positive stimulus than you are. So it's not a medical condition. It's now me knowing on a day where I'm going to be with family or working with a team, I need to do the right practices like the sauna, like the shower, like the omegas, etc., to upregulate BDNF. But the days where I want to write a book or I want to do some research where I need my in-depth, deep BDNF, deep meaning, giving everything a meaning type thinking, I'm not going to do anything because it's my superpower and I use it as a tool. So that's how we look at that. But there, again, there is a true bipolar disorder. We don't deal with that genetic condition. We deal with the function, which is the majority of what people deal with. My wife cannot sleep. Does this mean she needs consultation? BDNF AA, serotonin SS, COMT is slow. So she's a mess, to put it short. Like there's a lot going on there. So we can't answer this question here, but she would be really, you would really drive the needle with her if she was in a clinical program. Again, when there's this much going on, I can give you all the answers here, right? But when somebody is of this profile, with the serotonin is dysregulated and their BDNF is off, it's very hard for them to do anything. So her profile is not somebody who's going to take it and fix it. Her profile is someone that's going to take it and then analyze it and make it even a bigger problem, right? She's going to look at what we tell her, and if she's listening here right now, she's going to hear it, see it, and then analyze it and pick at it and see more problems and more nuances. And this is somebody whose profile speaks to, I need someone to help me, right? Not because they're not as good as somebody else. It's because they're too good at what they're doing. Their analytical behavior, overthinking, diving too deep. That person needs a coach to pull them back, to pull the reins, right? That person, yes, I would suggest highly needs that. TT, MAL, more anxiety, contradict, GG. So you said it exactly to Anonymous. I experienced anxiety, but I let it go, right? So the MAO is a supporting character to the COMT, right? So you have this fast COMT, but in the middle, you get stuck a little bit, the slow MAO, right? So that's where your MAO is nuancing the COMT a little bit. It's fast, but it takes a little time to kick in because you have this slow MAO. So it's exactly like you described. You'll experience that blip of anxiety or holding on or whatever, but then it's gone, right? So use this as a functional tool. Use this as your red alert system. Problem, problem, problem. I see them all because my MAO is a little slower, so I am stuck a little bit. But now because my COMT is so fast and functional, I can actually do something about it. Understand how your brain works and use this as your superpower. Use this as your tool, that whenever there's a pleasure or reward seeking experience, I get stuck for a few seconds, and I see and feel a little bit more, but then I'm ready to do something. So let your body go through that. That's what you're wired for. Let your body experience it that way and do it that way, right? Anonymous has also asked, is hot bath same effect as sauna? It's not the same effect. We have not seen it to be the same effect. You cannot get the same feeling from a hot bath as you can from a sauna. When you're 10 minutes into a hot sauna, between the 10 to 20 minute mark, you might even feel like you're about to pass out. Very hard to get that from a bath, right? The hot water against your skin is intolerable versus the level of heat you can get from the hot air. Very different. So it's difficult to get that same outcome. Sharon asked, combining a bath of aromatherapy. Oh, for sure. So this goes back to what we were saying earlier of now you know what to prioritize, now you know what to focus on. Now you can start taking all of the solutions that you may already know or hear about and applying them to yourself. So a bath of aromatherapy is highly calming, a great solution for anyone that has sort of mood issues. Aromatherapy will signal to your brain what it thinks is going on. So if you have the right aromas, calming aromas, if you're in a state of stress, and so let's take, for example, the person with the adr2b that's off. Even a smell will make them recall emotion, right? Going to the office every day where I experience pain, I start every day with stress because I remember the smell and the lighting and the sound and walking up to the front door. So if I can trigger a different memory with aromatherapy, a smell of, there's candles that will smell like food or cinnamon or like a hot cross bun, or a plant that remind you of different things. That's a way to deal with a genetic suboptimability because you have this powerful recall built in. So let's turn on a different recall by triggering it with a different stimulus. So now you start to understand how to apply these tools, right? Patty asked, adr2b says let thing go, yet COMT is opposite. How can that be? So in different contexts, adder to be means you do not bind emotional stimulus. So you do not remember the feeling, the emotion of the trauma that happened. COMT AA means that you get stuck in reward and pleasure seeking behavior. So it takes a lot longer for you to clear neurochemicals. So whereas you're not eliciting and recalling the feeling, so it's easy for you to say, yeah, this is not a big deal. It has nothing to do with last time, right? You may remember everything that happened because you were stuck in it for so long. So the intellectual recall. Let's just, to say it simply, it's easy for you to let go of the feeling. It's very difficult for you to let go of the information. So you're like, yeah, we're good. This is not trauma, but I do remember this, and we need to deal with this. So remember that there's a difference between the emotion and the intellect. So it's very easy for you to move on from the feeling, but it's a little tricky for you to move on from the information. You do remember what happened. It's like, we need to deal with this, right? Adrian is asking, what supplements do you recommend for BDNF AA? So NMN helps with cellular health. It's not really a BDNF tool. I would think, we actually make something called BDNF Optimizer, and it's the whole fruit coffee extract. You can get ours, you can get it from wherever you source your supplements. Whole fruit coffee extract. So it's not coffee, it's not caffeine, it's the actual fruit. And it provides a nutrient that actually upregulates BDNF. So we make it, it's called BDNF Optimizer, or you can get the whole fruit coffee extract. And if you take it consistently, your mood will change over time, right? All of the stuff we talked about, sauna, hot shower in the morning, cold plunging, low intensity exercise, right? Yoga, stretching, all of these things are BDNF upregulators. NMN is more of a cellular health tool. Anonymous asks, follow up with MAO associated with addictive behavior. Yeah, so MAO is that in between dopamine and COMT. So if you have the fast MAO, the GG, much more leaning towards addictive behavior. If you also have the fast GG COMT, it's like screaming addiction, right? Now, Evan's asking, is lion's mane effective for BDNF? Yes. So adaptogens, specifically lion's mane, is really good for neuroplasticity and neurogenesis. Adaptogens are one of the few things that work really well. So all of the functional mushrooms are really good tool. They may not specifically upregulate BDNF, but they replace its job. So they actually go ahead and start promoting neurogenesis and new neural pathways and new synapses, and they take over for what the job that BDNF isn't doing. So that's a great solution, Evan. So that's another example of, I identified the priority, my BDNF is off. I need to do something about this. This is where my problem is coming from. Now, what do I do is associated to the problem. Poor BDNF means poor neuroplasticity. So now all of a sudden you can solve it by taking lion's mane and adaptogenic mushrooms, right? So, okay, looks like we've been through all your questions. There's one more thing in the chat here. Oh, that was somebody.
That was just a housekeeping announcement from one of us, Kashif.
Okay. So any other thoughts, guys? Want to make sure I respect your time too, because I knew we were supposed to end at 9 and 10 minutes. I don't want to take you over. Any other thoughts or questions? Anybody that needs to know more about coaching, supplementation, how to implement this stuff, if you need more on that, let us know. Mary, I see that it says your hand is raised. I don't know if you had a question or if that was an accident. You're welcome to drop a question into the Q&A. It says your hand was raised. Mary Mopsick. Maybe that may have been an accident, but you're welcome to ask the question if you'd like. Accident, okay, no problem. Any other thoughts or questions, guys? I hope that this was valuable. The intention was to, take time to give you more value from the reports. We know how much value is there, but without going through something like this, it may be hard to see it all. Now, when you go back to the reports, you may see them differently. You may realize there's a lot more there than what you thought was there, right? And now when you go back to these reports, you can start using them as a civilian scientist yourself, as a biomedical explorer yourself. You become the scientist, you become the clinician, you become your own health quarterback, because what we want to arm you with is the ability to interpret, to understand and apply this stuff. Start seeing traits in your children, start seeing traits in your family. You're going to start to see problems differently. You're going to start to see relationships differently. You're going to start to see your work differently. So this is the intention, is we wanted to have that impact with you here, where you truly understand yourself by understanding yourself biologically. Here's who I am at the hard wiring level. Here's my schematics, right? Here's how I'm wired. Life will change. Life will change. There'll be a sense of relief of understanding who you truly are and how this world perceives you and how you perceive the world. A lot of things that you used to feel and problems you used to have will unravel themselves, right? A lot of things that you need to fix, you'll fix from a different perspective now. So this is our intention, and also, of course, to give you time to ask your questions so that we can solve your problems for each one of you. So if there's no further thoughts or questions, we'll give you some time back and let you go. We wanted to make sure we honored your time and closed before 9 o'clock. Courtney has a question. If we have specific questions on our test, who can we reach out to? So if you want to find out if there's more you need, and perhaps coaching is the right thing, Tracy's answering you right now. So Tracy's going to let you know who you talk to on our team, whether it's a call or a coaching or whatever. Tracy, by the way, is our COO who runs the clinical operations, the clinical side of the business, right? So she's going to give you that answer. Courtney, we'll make sure you're supported there.
Excellent, Cash. We have answered the last question, and we're ready to have you sign off.
All right, guys, have a good night. Keep in mind, Tracy, I just realized I should also let everyone know about the book if they want more information. The DNA Way, people ask about that. So take a look at that if you want more information. Email, if you hadn't had a chance tonight, or if you wake up tomorrow saying, oh, I wish I'd asked this question, whatever, client care, the email's there. We'll leave that open for a few minutes. Thank you again, guys. Good evening, and I hope you got what you needed here. Pleasure being with you. Good night.
Thank you, Kashif. Have a good night. Great job, everybody.